We seem to have reached the age where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away. That is a quote from Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, widely considered to be a mediocre movie, but that line has stuck with me for years and felt quite prominent this year. It wasn't all bad. I hit up my first convention, too many games, and met a lot of nice people. I completed my very first PC build with little issue, and I played so many good games this year that I actually forgot to take notes. So if it seems that I forgot to mention an aspect of anything this year, that's probably why. So moving past that depressing note, here are the games I played in 2025. It only felt appropriate for me to break in the Year of the Snake with a game where you play as an actual snake. If you've heard of Snake Pass for any reason, it's more than likely because of the fact that the soundtrack was composed by David Wise, and yeah, you can really feel the Donkey Kong Country DNA in this one. Snake Pass is a game where they really want you to feel like you're controlling a snake's body. If you try to move in a straight line, you'll just slow to a crawl, so it's actually better to slither around. You'll also want to wrap yourself tightly around objects while climbing so that the weight of your tail doesn't drag you down. It's simple enough to control, but difficult to master. I actually find the story behind this game's development really interesting. Apparently when learning to program in the Unreal Engine, Seb Lacey forgot to attach a rope to the ceiling, and the result of the programmed physics made him think of a snake. So after some encouragement from his colleagues, he made a proof of concept, submitted it to the company Game Jam, and before he knew it, they had a whole team working to make this into a real game. He would also jokingly say that he would like David Wise to do the music, seeing it as nothing more than a pipe dream, only for the audio producer to tap him on the shoulder one day and say, "Have I got a surprise for you?" Yeah, it really sounds like they had a positive work environment at Sumo Digital, which makes it so sad to learn that they had to lay off a bunch of people earlier this year. For roughly $20, I'd say Snake Pass is worth it to experience a much different take on the 3D platforming genre. Balatro was a game I swore I would never buy because I know that I have an addictive personality. And then it came free with my PlayStation Plus subscription, so screw my free time, I guess. I don't really know how to describe Balatro outside of what it is. A roguelike deck builder where you add and remove cards to try and create the ultimate poker deck with the added help of some game-changing Joker cards. Plus, let's face it, if you've somehow found my channel, you likely already know what this game is about, and I can tell you that, yes, it is as addicting as everyone makes it out to be. I Am Alive is a game that's been on my radar for about as long as I've discovered my love for post-apocalyptic media. It was always one of those titles I saw whenever I would browse the Microsoft Game Store, but was never quite interested enough to pick up and play. You play as a nameless protagonist, yes, nameless protagonist. I don't know why so many sources claim he has a name, because nothing is ever said in game, who after a near world-ending event, spent a whole year walking from the East Coast to his hometown in search of his family. Welp, not an hour in, he finds his home empty, his wife and kids seemingly evacuated, a little girl who looks like his daughter but isn't.
That's not my kid at all.
And now it's time to find her mom in post-apocalyptia, where everybody wants to kill you and every bullet counts. And I really do mean that, by the way. You can intimidate enemies with your gun, even if you have no bullets, using their fear to your advantage as you demand them to back off into dangerous situations. The catch: if you hold them up for too long without taking them out, they'll call your bluff, rushing you under the belief that even if you did have ammo, you wouldn't use something so scarce and valuable on them. I really like this take on combat in a post-apocalyptic survival game. When it works. Oftentimes I would go to push my enemy off a building, but my character would instead decide to clash their machetes together, and I would die because the other guys would see that I was vulnerable and gang up on me. Not to mention that, well, minor spoiler, but you give up your gun in the final level, So you have to defeat a wave of enemies, most of which have their own guns, completely foregoing the intimidation mechanic this game's combat was built around. Does that sound frustrating? Because it is! You do get a hunter's bow later in the game, but it's not necessarily a downgrade or an upgrade, seeing as it takes longer to fire, meaning enemies are rarely intimidated by it, and you can receive any arrows you shot, so you basically have unlimited ammo as long as you don't miss your target. When you're not in combat, however, you spend most of your time climbing buildings, a lot like another Ubisoft title. Unlike Assassin's Creed, however, you have to manage your stamina during the climb. A bit more like Breath of the Wild, actually. And you can consume resources during the climb to restore stamina like Zelda as well. You can also set down a climbing... How do you spell that? Climbing... Piton? Piton? What? That can't be right. You can also set down a climbing piton if you feel you need a more permanent resting spot. It's not a bad mix of game mechanics, but considering how they rarely cross over with each other, it's not hard to recognize where you'll be climbing up buildings or fighting off enemies. Side note, you do get a grappling hook at one point, but it's so underutilized that I genuinely forgot about it. The game is written like a young adult novel, and I don't say that as a compliment. Things are kept intentionally vague and simplistic so you don't have to think too hard about it. For example, what do you think the people called the near-world ending event? That's right, the event. It's called the event. So obviously the life-drained dust clouds are referred to something equally as significant, right? No, you idiot, it's not magic or supernatural or anything, so it's just called the dust, except for when it's called the fog. Wait, it's only been a year, don't tell me you all forgot the difference between dust and fog already. And on the note of simplicity, the story feels like it's doing the bare minimum to check off all the post-apocalyptic boxes. World-ending event? Check. Food and water are scarce? Also check. Uncomfortable sexual themes? Bet your ass. Innocent child to lighten the mood and or serve as hope for humanity? Fuck yeah. Alright, so watch this scene. A pretty lady is calling out for help out in the open. Now, I've played enough post-apocalyptic games to know that this is a trap, so I carefully comb the area and... oh, there's nothing here actually. Okay, maybe she really does need my help. But the moment I get close to her, 3 enemies spawn around the corner I had just searched. Are you kidding me? Okay, quick tangent. I know this is supposed to be the games I played and not the games I wish I had played, but after seeing the trailer for Darkworks' original concept of I Am Alive, I think I would have preferred to play with this idea. Sure, it's more post-disaster than post-apocalyptic, but look at this. It's not visually dark to keep with a theme. The protagonist is using resources as bait for environmental traps. I would have loved to see the final product here.
I'll see you upstairs, Adam.
That's why IMDb thinks the protagonist's name is Adam. Personally, I wouldn't recommend I Am Alive unless you were really bored and this was already in your collection for some reason. But I am seeing more and more people warming up to this game, so think of that as you will. Sonic Free Knuckles is a game that I have technically owned for years on the Sonic Mega Collection Plus, but our computer at the time was way too slow to run most of the games. Which is fine. After all, who needs Sonic Free Knuckles when you've got the prototype for the Sonic Heroes intro? I'm saying that this was a long time coming, basically. So, I have mixed feelings on Sonic Free Knuckles, because gameplay-wise, I think it's my favorite of the classic trilogy. The controls are tight, especially when playing as Sonic with his spin dash and insta-shield, as well as the techniques he can use with the environmental shields. Whoa, say that again? As well as the techniques he can use with the environmental shields. Environmental shields? Elemental shields? Jeez, where the hell did that come from? I liked how Knuckles felt like playing a totally different game, complete with a separate final boss, and Tails is... well, Tails is doing his best. But I can only count on maybe one hand the zones that I actually like to play through. And while I wouldn't see that as an issue in most Sonic games, since I can beat most in an afternoon, it took me 7 hours to finish Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Granted, that could be because this was my first proper playthrough, so I don't know the stages as well, but you can't deny that this is one beefy game, and there's only so much a kickin' soundtrack can push me through. I can acknowledge that Blue Sphere is one of the better types of special stages. That doesn't mean I like it though. But it was kind of worth it to experience Hypersonic. Sometimes you just want a taste of ultimate power, you know? If you haven't played Sonic 3 and Knuckles for yourself yet, you really should. It just has so much to offer despite being a 16-bit Genesis game. Replayability, the charm of all the characters, potentially multiple hours of fun high-speed gameplay. It may not be my personal favorite Sonic game, but I can definitely see why it's so beloved. God of War. This was a bitch and a half to get working. So I had a copy of the original game sitting on my shelf for years now. I didn't want to play any other God of War games until I finished Kratos' first outing, so I popped it into my childhood PS2 and it crashed on the opening cinematic because the disc just stopped working altogether. So I bought another Greatest Hits copy only to find that it wasn't working either. And then it hit me. Both PS2 God of War games use the DVD-ROM format, which is the first thing the PS2 fails to recognize once the optical disc laser begins to wear out. So, my PS2 isn't dead, but it's getting there. My cheapest plan B was to borrow my friend's PS3 and buy the God of War saga off eBay, but because of the second wave of post office strikes in my country, I had no idea when or really if it would arrive anytime soon. So it was time for Plan C. Play it on my PS5. Except the only option for that is to stream the PS3 version, which requires a PlayStation Plus subscription, a subscription I had just cancelled because it was getting too expensive. So I resorted to the more expensive Plan D, buy a refurbished PS2 Slim. Which is fine, I've been wanting to get a slim PS2 for a while, so this was basically killing two birds with one stone. I was actually impressed with how well the game looked on my HD TV. Normally I'd have to mess around with settings just to get retro games to look half decent, but here I just turned on widescreen and was happy with the result. I'm also not a tech guy, so don't quote me on that. God of War also made me realize that I much prefer the ancient Greek setting when it's trying to go for more realistic visuals, seeing as a lot of these old myths and stories revolve around people transforming into grotesque monsters. I do want to talk about something I noticed with Kratos' character that I'm kind of hoping pays off as I continue with the series. My brother used to study psychology and he taught me of something called the anchoring effect, which is basically a natural bias that humans have where we tend to anchor our knowledge of things to our first exposure of that topic. It's pretty well known at this point that Kratos is not a good person, but because the first time you're introduced to Kratos in the original God of War with him throwing himself off a cliff claiming the gods have abandoned him, most people who have played this game for the first time are anchored to that feeling of sympathy. You know that you probably shouldn't be rooting for Kratos, but you are secretly hoping for redemption. The combat is fast-paced and brutal, always keeping you on your toes with enemies getting stronger alongside you, and introducing new monsters that cover each other's weaknesses. Using Kratos' Blades of Chaos alongside the magic powers gifted to him by the gods is a ton of fun. Many of the most memorable fights in my mind are the ones that also involve environmental challenges, like the infamous conveyor belts into spinning blades and flaming floors while imps dive bomb you and archers shoot at you from across the room combo. But at least the orchestral soundtrack is good. The only fight I can say I flat out disliked was the final boss. Not to spoil too much, but I absolutely hate it when a game takes away everything you've gotten throughout the game and then forces you to learn a new playstyle in an environment that really doesn't allow you to get used to it. The game also crashed on me on the final boss, so there's some extra bitter memories there. That said though, it did take me an embarrassingly long time to beat the Armored Minotaur boss because for some reason I just never thought to walk to the other side of the room. If you have a way to play God of War, you definitely should try it for yourself. I haven't even mentioned the secrets and extra challenges you can find throughout the game. Fun fact, did you know the hidden phone number in the game was only recently disconnected in 2024? That's some dedication to your fans. Don't call it now though, who knows who owns that number. On June 11th, 2025, my grandfather passed away. It was a very stressful time full of grief and every instance of family drama that you could think of. He was the kind of guy who just loved to show off the things that he enjoyed. Every time I'd visit him, he'd be coloring in one of his nature coloring books with models of his favorite cars next to him, and some wild western film playing on the TV. He also used to help me through my games when I was still learning to read, so it only felt right to play a western game in his memory. And hey, why not add some extra nostalgia onto that hill of melancholy? So I booted up the old PlayStation 2 for some Red Dead Revolver. And then my PS2 died after the first mission, so I had to upgrade to the Slim I had used to play God of War. I like to think it was the remnants of the Ghost of Sparta within that was keeping it going just a little longer.
That damn doggone leaved himself all over them fancy boots here.
I really miss when developers took the time to make the main menu in-game. You know what I mean? Medal of Honor Frontline had the intelligence desk, Psychonauts was more interactive by having you walk around the brain, and here in Red Dead Revolver, it's a sheriff's office with multiplayer on wanted posters and the story mode in a journal on the desk. It adds charm, you know? While there's a story that clearly had some amount of thought put into it, at the end of the day, it feels like a side attraction for the multiplayer mode. It's very arcade in nature, going from one level to the next with a shop at the start of most levels. Every shop in the game has new weapons, but also items to buy that unlock characters in multiplayer, and they're usually the most expensive, so it's pretty clear that the main reason to get a better score is to earn more money to buy everything. I haven't been able to try the multiplayer yet, but from what people have told me, it's a lot of fun to mess around with everybody's special powers, and apparently feels a lot like the N64 GoldenEye at times. The quick draw duels are fun, but the later ones require insanely fast reflexes and can feel like a huge difficulty spike. And while the second level would have you believe that this is a cover-based shooter, you'll actually start taking more damage hiding behind cover than you ever will just running and gunning. Sometimes the campaign feels like a down-to-earth revenge story, and other times it feels like something out of Trigun. So when I think of how I can recommend this game to people, I just think of what Grandpa used to say about his westerns. You just sit down, shut up, and try to have some fun with it.
What do you say, partner?
Once while having a particularly down day, I decided to give Fallout 4 another shot, going for some of the achievements I was missing. This time I went for an unarmed build, and wow, I can't remember the last time I've had this much trouble with an unarmed build in a Fallout game. But it also made me realize something. While Fallout 4 does a lot differently and is nowhere near my favorite Fallout game, it's still a weirdly comfortable experience.
Just
No more grumbling. Stop your cries. Hooray, bravo, yeah, you guys. Love is blooming. Cheers, yokai.
It's hard to believe that it's been almost 10 years since I played a Yokai Watch game. Wait, 10 years? No, that's not right. I played Bony Spirits just a few years ago in 2016. Oh, yeah, that's not far off, actually.
Your bones are scraped clean by the desolate wind.
While I genuinely enjoyed Yokai Watch when it came out, I even enjoyed the lighthearted shenanigans of the anime, Yokai Watch never took off in North America. Though, to be blunt, I don't think the marketing they did really helped with that. Like, really guys? You're gonna beat the Pokemon clone allegations by making your second game have 2 versions and a third enhanced edition? Why stop there? Let's put a Ruby, Sapphire, or Emerald in each box. So after Yokai Watch 2 flopped overseas, we got a spin-off, a mobile game that I've never even heard of, and Yokai Watch Free, the last game in the franchise to get an English localization, which is a little funny considering the game starts with you moving into an American-based town. It only took 2 months for scalpers to start selling the game at hundreds of dollars, which tells me that level 5 didn't make enough copies to meet demands, because I remember scouring every store in my area to get my hands on it and coming up empty-handed. So alas, I was forced to sell for a digital copy when reality attempted to strike my wallet once again. In a decision that I think is actually an improvement, the battle system has been completely revamped, including a new tactics board. Instead of most battles being on essentially autopilot, you can move your yokai around the board, dodging enemies' ultimates, pairing up for combo attacks, and using each other as meat shields. Now here's a decision I find a little odd. In the past games, you chose if you wanted to play as a boy or a girl. You know, basic, which model do you want to identify with? But in Yokai Watch Free, you play as both the boy and girl characters, jumping back and forth between their own stories. And on top of that, the original female protagonist has been replaced with a new character. When I first realized this, I thought she was going to be a new friend that Nate meets when moving to BBQ, but her story takes place in Springdale, the city he just moved away from, which begs the question to me, why replace Katie? I know I'm asking for a lot from a game made for kids, but what I loved about Yokai Watch 2 was that it wasn't afraid to tackle some of the more unfortunate things children may have to deal with in life, so this feels like an immediate downgrade. We could have had a story of Katie dealing with her loneliness after watching her best friend move to another country, but instead we get a rehash of Jibanyan's story with an otaku archetype. And before you tell me the otaku thing is an over-exaggeration, Chapter 3 puts her in a dream world where she works as a maid in a maid cafe, performs in an idol group complete with rhythm game, and becomes the secret 4th member of her favorite magical girl group, all in the span of 30 fucking minutes. Swapping between both protagonists is actually pretty fun. At first. So eventually both our heroes meet each other in person and team up. The chapter that follows is so repetitive, I had to force myself not to skip too much dialogue. The party gets split up and you have to explore the dungeon, regularly swapping between the two teams. Why do I sound so frustrated talking about this? Because you can only switch characters at a save point. So you find the key, you go back and pass the key through the bars, despite getting a shared inventory the minute they met. Swap characters, repeat, go through the classic spot the difference in 2 identical rooms puzzle, find the difference, swap, find the next difference, then go through 2 more challenges that require swapping between the 2 teams. Yeah, this chapter overstays its welcome. Hope you befriended the right yokai, by the way. So, back in the day, I made a video titled Top 10 Personal Killjoys, and I put befriending yokai at number 2 because finding rare yokai is already a time sink, but to then not have a guaranteed way to recruit them is just super frustrating. It's not like Pokemon where you can just stock up on Ultra Balls and keep using them until you catch the Pokemon. No, in Yokai Watch, you can only use 1 item to increase the chance of them wanting to be your friend, and you won't even know if it worked until you finish the battle. So I was really hoping that Yokai Watch Free would fix that, and
The answer is yes and no.
they introduced a new item called the Forbidden Fruit, which is a guaranteed befriendment on use. But it's pretty rare without the QR code exploit, which I don't think even works properly now that the eShop has shut down. And without it, there can be some frustrating moments. For example, in Chapter 5 of Haley's story, I had to befriend a specific yokai to continue the story, which took me, no exaggeration, over 2 hours. Because that yokai's favorite food is hot dogs, and you can't buy hot dogs in Springdale. Well, there is another way to befriend yokai, but that's not until later, and it kind of dives into spoiler territory.
Steve Jobs shows up, gives you the latest model of the watch that morphs into a gun, which you then use to shoot Mr. X. What the fuck is this series anymore?
Hey, get out of here! I always hated that one. Oh, that might rattle up the dog. Okay, yeah, so you get a blaster, and the way it works is that you load one of your bench yokai into the cartridge. Which tribe that yokai is from determines how the firing mechanism functions. You then spin a roulette wheel to see if your gun hurts the enemy or charms them. So, yes, there is another way to help befriend yokai, but it's still random, so please, for the love of God, stop telling me it's easier than it sounds. And then there's all the extra stuff, like scanning yokai isn't enough to fight them anymore, you now have to play a shooter to lure them out as well. Terror Time's back, improved from the last game since you can fight the Oni again. Nate has a chance of waking up in the dark hour when he goes to sleep. There's the Blaster's T dungeon crawl, rhythm games, a rafting course to play through when you're traveling to certain locations. There's just so much that bogs this game down. Overall, I feel that Yokai Watch Free is trying to recapture the spirit of the original game while also injecting it with new energy. So, the thing that everyone claimed Pokemon was doing before they realized it wasn't. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up to you.
What secrets does the Yokai Watch hold? Find out next time!
You bother me! Don't you be ignoring me!
Sorry!
So I had been curious about Trauma Team for a few years now. I was told this is basically a standalone spin-off of the Trauma Center series, and then was told it's actually a sequel to the second game. Understandably, that confused me a bit, so I looked it up for myself, and yes, it does have returning characters from Trauma Center, but I don't really think it's that big of a deal. Trauma Team has you taking control of 6 different doctors, all of their own field of profession. Maria, the first response paramedic with a short-fused temper. Gabriel Cunningham, a diagnostician who is extra sarcastic now that he's been assigned an AI assistant. Tomoe Tachibana, an endoscopic surgeon whose family disapproves of her career choices. Hank Freebird, orthopedic surgeon by day and superhero Captain Eagle by night. Naomi Kimishima, a forensic expert who can communicate with the dead. And lastly, in general surgery, CRS-01, a death row inmate suffering from amnesia. The first half of the game is used to get to know the characters and their playstyle. It's interesting because you can either go in chronological order or focus on one character. So you can piece the story together if you like, or maybe you're just really curious on why Tomoe won't shut up about this Path of Honor stuff. The second half of the game is where things really take off as a sudden epidemic of viral hemorrhagic fever sends everything into chaos. According to one of the developers, they wanted to make a much more grounded narrative after the world was affected by the 2009 swine flu pandemic, but I find that statement a bit hard to take seriously when the game still has things like superheroes and ghosts running around. With 6 different playstyles, it'd be impossible for me to talk in depth about each one of them, so I'm just gonna rank them all individually. First response, way too stressful and just makes me envious of real paramedics. Endoscopy. Fun if a little awkward with the motion controls. Would rank higher if I didn't have so much trouble switching tools. Diagnostics. Kind of fun at first, but I strained my eyes looking for symptoms in the MRI images. Orthopedics. Something about its focus on pristine precision is weirdly addictive, though it's also because of that precision that you may find yourself cursing the motion controls the most. General surgery. Creating incisions, draining fluids, sewing cross stitches, all that and more with a Wii remote and nunchuck. It's so chaotic and I kinda love it. Forensics. Kinda feels like cheating since there's no operations involved unless you want to count the 1 or 2 times you reconstruct the victim's skull, but what can I say, I like a good mystery. While the story did lose me a bit near the end and some of the goofier elements clash with the more serious setting, my conclusion, or rather my diagnosis, is to absolutely try it for yourself. Good luck finding it cheap these days though, it is an Atlas game after all.
They're panicked. They think you're making an escape.
No, I'm not turning my back on saving lives anymore.
God damn it. All right, but whatever happens, don't blame me. Maria, you heard the man. Lower the stretcher. Hurry.
In 2024, I played through the original Baldur's Gate and absolutely loved it. So much so that I wanted to jump into the sequel as soon as possible. For various reasons that didn't pan out, but I did get to it eventually. It was also the first game I played on my very first PC build, the Bay Machine. definitely not pushing any benchmarks, but I didn't want to wait any longer to get to Shadows of Alm. Baldur's Gate 2 doesn't do too much to change the gameplay from the previous entry, but it really didn't need to since the original got so much right from the start. The biggest difference in gameplay, or rather improvement, is that the experience cap can now get some classes up to level 40, meaning you have access to high-level class abilities and spells up to the 9th level. And since you can import your character from the first game, it wasn't long before my Fire Mage was casting the Limited Wish spell. There's also strongholds you can inherit now based on your class, each with their own functions, a safe place to rest, as well as their own side quests. Many characters from the original make a return, but not all of them will join your party or even care enough to ask how you've been, which adds on to why I love the characters in the original for having their own motives and feeling like actual people. Again, just because they're willing to join your party doesn't make them your friends. The characters that do join your party, either new or returning, are much more fleshed out, and it's possible to even romance some of them. My favorite companions this time around are, well, honestly, I think all of them. They're all great for different reasons, and I'm so excited to see how things pan out for my party in the Throne of Baal expansion.
Blurring the lines between consciousness and dreaming. There was no malice or hatred, no mention of an old score. Only quick capture and the promise of grim deeds to come.
Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we?
Transistor. This was the second game I played for on my new PC, as well as the second game I played to star a main character named Red. Funny how that works out. I've actually owned the Transistor soundtrack for years because it's a really good soundtrack, but the game itself sat in my backlog for God knows how long at this point. But with all the praise going around for Supergiant Games' Hades and the now newly released Hades 2, I figured it was finally time to give Transistor a proper go. Even if I did ultimately spend nearly an hour listening to the soundtrack in this weird vaporwave room. Combat revolves around two things mainly: functions and turns. The turn mechanic allows you to pause the game and perform a series of actions in just a few seconds. Functions have a bit more depth to them. They act as attacks you can use in combat, passive abilities, upgrade to add effects to other functions, as well as your life, since losing all of your health will remove a function and lock it out of use for a while, starting with the function that you've been relying on the most. It has a story, but it's weirdly vague, and I don't know if I like that or not. Not helped by how much of the story and characters are revealed through flavor text that you can only unlock if you use a certain combination of functions. On one hand, this is clearly deliberate since you'll be experimenting while your favorite function is on its death cooldown, but I played for this game twice and I still needed to watch a video walkthrough to remember what the story was about. It feels like I'm playing D&D with a dungeon master who's gently reminding the players of his campaign but is just happy to see his friends enjoying the world he built for them. Because noticing small things like Red typing help into a message board before quickly deleting it, that's character. I love small things like that. But outside the story behind Red's sword, I honestly couldn't tell you what was going on. But Transistor still gets a lot right. I wouldn't mind coming back to this game or even checking out Supergiant's other games. 2026 does mark Bastion's 15th anniversary after all.
What I said back there about wanting to see you again, face to face. I want you to know I meant it.
So, funny story about this one. I realized I didn't actually own this game after I had already added it to the pledge list, so I bought it on my Xbox One and I checked the reviews where pretty much all the 1-star reviews are just people saying to play Hollow Knight instead because that's the better game. Now, if this really is the lesser of the two games, holy crap, I'm excited to play Hollow Knight. Let's get the obvious out first. This game is beautiful. Beautiful graphics, beautiful art style, beautiful soundtrack, and even a beautiful story. It's like playing an animated short film. There was, however, one tiny problem I had with the game throughout. Combat is kind of boring, boiling down to mashing the X button, and when you're not spending what feels like an eternity pelting enemies with your wisps, you're one-shotting them with your bash, making both extremes less than satisfying. Thankfully, this game doesn't have any boss fights focusing on the combat, but rather has you use your platforming skills to escape the environment. This is where Ori's gameplay really shines. Because while people have sworn to me that this is a Metroidvania, it definitely feels like it was made to be a platformer first. Movement feels tight and fluid, especially when you've unlocked most of your abilities. I feel like if I hadn't started to value my time more and continue with my achievement hunting obsession, that I definitely would have tried to finish the game on one life mode, the achievement for which is faintly titled Unhinged. I know I'm like 10 years too late to this, but definitely check out Ori and the Blind Forest if you haven't already. The art and music is captivating, and I appreciate how it tells its story without talking down to a younger audience. I hope to see just as good quality in Ori and the Will of the Wisps. I've never delved into Naughty Dog's other endeavors outside my childhood obsession of Crash Bandicoot, but I've had an interest in Uncharted for a while, mostly because of my love for treasure hunting action heroes like Indiana Jones and, I don't know any other ones. Locke from Final Fantasy VI? Drake's Fortune is pretty much everything I could have wanted from a game like this. Fighting pirates, surveying ancient ruins, and solving puzzles using solutions found in an old journal. That said though, I found Drake to be quite heavy feeling in his movements. I lost track of how many times I tried to approach a ladder to climb down, only for Nate to fall to his death. And while combat is still satisfying, there aren't really any fights that I'd consider memorable. I finished this game on the normal difficulty, and I remember dying a lot, though not just to ladders and firefights. The jet ski portion was by far the worst part of the game for me. Now the controls are too slippery and require me to stop completely to aim my grenade launcher or risk lightly tapping these explosive barrels. Don't even get me started on trying to avoid enemy fire on this thing. The story is nothing special, but it really did remind me of the old Indiana Jones trilogy, where it stays grounded for the most part, only for some supernatural chaos to swoop in at the very end. I also noticed that in-game conversations were usually, if not always, spaced out just enough so that it wouldn't be interrupted by a new one because you passed the trigger. That may seem like an odd thing to point out, but you have no idea how many other games have done this so poorly that it's broken my immersion. While I can't say I'm fully invested in these characters quite yet, I think I'd be happy to see them again in the sequel. If Among Thieves really is as big of an improvement as people say it is, I have high hopes.
Sweet.
So since The Witcher is a PC game from 2007 that never got a console release, I had to do a bit of troubleshooting to get it working properly. The Bay machine is just too powerful to run this game as intended. And even when I had gotten everything to optimal settings, it was still crashing frequently, and for some reason the GOG version only allows cloud sync for up to 200 megabytes when the autosaves alone were nearly 20 megabytes each. The game has you take control of the Witcher Geralt, a famous monster hunter suffering from amnesia who now needs to track down the mercenaries that stole the secrets to the Witcher's physical mutations. But since this is a continuation from the books, Geralt's already a famous Witcher, meaning he's got friends willing to help him out, which I find to be a nice breath of fresh air. Okay, maybe I've just never experienced it before, but isn't it a bit weird to hear me say that a character having friends is a refreshing take on the amnesiac hero trope?
Ever heard of the gnome Alfred Nabel?
Eskel, I have amnesia.
I played on hard mode, which stated that alchemy would be an essential part of survival, but I found myself not really needing to use my crafted items. In fact, there were some potions I just never used, like Black Blood, which turns your blood lethal against bloodsuckers like vampires, and another potion that's supposed to give you the ability to see invisible enemies, despite the fact there aren't any invisible enemies in the game. And I only ever used one bomb to escape a stun lock. I did use oils more often during the endgame, but only because they were taking up space in my inventory and I wanted to finish the game faster. If you've seen any footage of this game's combat, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this was a third-person action RPG. But really it's more like an RPG rhythm game. Just click the mouse on whatever you want to attack and watch for your sword to flourish so you can perform a combo. Famously, Witchers carry a steel sword for human opponents and a silver one for monsters, but switching between them takes an age to do so, so if you pulled out the wrong sword or Geralt did so automatically, it leaves you pretty vulnerable. There are also 2 other weapon slots for a small and large weapon, but since you can't perform your Witcher combos with them equipped, I found myself selling every other weapon I came across, even the torches, which are supposed to be a substitute for your cat potions to see in the dark. I eventually stopped using since the shield spell lights up caves fairly well. On the topic of magic, Witchers can invoke signs to use basic magic with their free hand during combat, and I found a use for pretty much every sign except the charm spell, since there's already a spell to stun enemies and the group sword style actually works best the more enemies surround you. The world of The Witcher, despite how colorful it can seem to the eyes, is a medieval dark fantasy and has an odd mix of Lovecraftian and Arthurian fairy tales. You'll find NPCs with their own schedules, running to shelter when it starts to rain, and old people begging for death to take them because plague and famine sucks. As early as the first chapter, I even noticed the captain of the guard walking around and lighting each individual torch the sun began to set. The overarching issue in this kingdom, though, is the political unrest between human and non-human races. After I slayed a cockatrice in the sewers with help from a knight from the Order of the Flaming Rose, I was considered an ally to said order and given access to service from their quartermaster. But at some point I said or did something that seemed sympathetic of non-humans, and my patronage was rejected because they believed I was working with the Squietel, a group of non-humans fighting the racism and discrimination against their people. Witchers are meant to be neutral in politics, but when Geralt needs help or is inconvenienced by one of their battles, it is a little harder to not pick a side, and I think it's when you're presented with these political and other moral dilemmas is when the story of The Witcher is at its best. The naughty romance cards really rubbed me the wrong way, though. Not because of the content on them, but because it made nearly every female character feel like a collectible, no matter how strong or independent their character actually was, because I guess being completely sterile means you can have casual sex with 0 consequences. The Witcher is a slow burn, and I'd argue that it doesn't really get good until the second half of Chapter 2, making it a harder recommendation because nobody wants to waste several hours on a game that isn't good from the start. I've talked with several people who have played The Witcher, and I was surprised by the contrast of people who said it's their favorite game that they make an effort to play every single year, and the ones that said they dropped it after the first chapter. I think it's safe to say that this is an acquired taste. I can definitely see why so many people get invested into this game, but I can also see the various quit moments throughout. Yet at the same time, it's hard not to appreciate such an ambitious project. Like, before The Witcher 3 made the franchise mainstream, who or what was The Witcher? Before the first Witcher game, who was CD Projekt Red? I'll tell you who they were. They were a bunch of guys making a game based off a series that they enjoyed. The Witcher may not be my new favorite RPG, but you know what? Call me a fan, because I want to see what happens in The Witcher 2. After my obligations with my other RPGs. Mace cannot wait any longer!
I'm a Witcher. I neither judge nor punish. I solve human problems. Not always using a sword.
Well, it's finally time to talk about Arkham City. Is what I would be saying if I hadn't realized I actually never played Arkham Asylum. Figured I better fix that before my Arkham City replay. I play on the Xbox 360, so I don't have access to the PS3 exclusive content that I just learned about. Why was it PS3 exclusive in the first place? I do find it kind of funny that my copy came with a set of 3D glasses. Works on any TV. Side note, this was also my first time playing with a 360 play and charge kit because, man, I don't know about you guys, I'm getting kind of sick of wireless controllers. Like, even with rechargeable batteries, I feel like half my game time is spent trying to find working batteries. The game begins with Batman personally driving Joker to Arkham Asylum, only for Harley Quinn to sneak in and release him and the other inmates, causing all hell to break loose. I like that the intro isn't too long and is still able to give enough context clues for the non-Batman fans that might be playing. I also like how the first fight gives you a good idea on how the combat works. Batman feels super tight and any mistakes made during a fight feels like your own fault. And I will never stop singing the praises of the camera work in these games. It's just so nice to have the camera move automatically to the best possible position during fights. That said though, I felt a little fatigued fighting with the mooks in this game. It's rare for you to have to switch things up, and fighting the guys enhanced with Titan formula tends to be a slog. Not help that even Bane is just like the other big guys, making Batman's rogue gallery in the game feel a little disappointing. Personally, I prefer the villain lineup in Arkham City, with the exception of Scarecrow. The Scarecrow sections are one of those things that people just wouldn't shut up about, so I've unfortunately been spoiled in that aspect, but even when I knew it was coming, it still got me. I can't even be mad about that. I found the platforming challenges pretty clunky though. That could be because I'm so used to how Arkham City handles it. It's fun to glide around with Batman's cape, but without a way to gain altitude, it's really just for crossing gaps. Unlocking new gadgets is also a lot of fun, especially when you find new ways to use them during the stealth segments. There's nothing more fun for me than scanning the room in detective mode and planning my next attack. I firmly believe that Batman is best when using fear and intimidation to take down his enemies. You know something kind of weird I noticed while playing Arkham Asylum though? Alfred's not in the game. Yeah, Bruce's trusted butler and practical father figure, you'd think he'd at least try and get in touch with Batman after hearing about the inmates taking over the asylum, but I guess they thought Oracle fit the role best this time around. I've often heard the opinion that people prefer Arkham Asylum over City because it's basically a Metroidvania, but I mentioned Arkham City again. Sorry, I can't do it. I still love Arkham City. That's right, I like open world games. I'm the problem. I ruined Zelda. But really, Batman Arkham City is such a major improvement over Asylum. The combat's been fine-tuned, there's more gadgets that you can easily use during fights now, and gives Batman new abilities. Not to mention the big improvement on the boss fights. I was so worried that I wasn't going to enjoy the Mr. Freeze fight as much as I used to, but it's still a good fight in my eyes. There just aren't enough bosses that actually adapt to the player's abilities. I totally understand why people may prefer Arkham Asylum, but I'll always love Arkham City. The tight combat, gliding mechanics, I even like the parts where you get to play as Catwoman, even if the pacing is a bit weird there. There's definitely some problems with the story, and I have no idea how Harley's character changed so fast between the two games, but Arkham City is just too fun for me to want to nitpick. I know it's horribly cliche to say at this point, but it really does make you feel like Batman.
Overruled.
And there we go, yet another year in the bag. However, I did notice that my pledge games this time around didn't go very far outside of my comfort zone. So, for this year, I reached out to some friends to add their own games to the list, and these are the games that will take top priority during 2026. My brother GalacticLime picked out Max Payne. My buddy the Plant Commander picked Pac-Man World 2. While Kai the Otaku artist chose The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks. Honestly, all good picks. I'm really excited to get to those. Along with my new pledge games for 2026. Persona Q, Shadow of the Labyrinth.
Leave it to me! Impossible!
God of War 2. Yakuza for the PlayStation 2. Xenosaga. Shantae and the Seven Sirens.
I'm gonna get to the very bottom of it.
Bayonetta Free. Alice Mare. And considering it will have been 10 years since I started making these types of videos, I figured it'd only be appropriate to replay what I considered to be my favorite game I played in 2016. So, we'll see if A Bird Story still holds up in my slightly matured mind. Thank you all for watching. I hope to finally get off my butt and actually start making content again, but considering I only seem to be making one video a year, I'm not gonna make any promises. Till next time, take it easy and stay positive.